Signori Presidenti, signori e signore, desidero ringraziare l'organizzazione per questa importante occasione di incontro, per la cortesia che hanno manifestato richiedendo la mia presenza. Mi sento in vero davvero privilegiato e profondamente onorato di poter dividere e discutere nostri modi di vedere un importante istituto, o forse potrei dire un fenomeno importante, la giustizia. Devo anche confessarvi che mi sento anche particolarmente motivato perché ci troviamo in questo dove è nata e si sviluppata la civiltà romana, dalla quale è nato l'impianto sistematico del diritto civile. Mi sento letteralmente circondato da molti tra i migliori giuristi italiani ed è forse il caso di portarvi la conoscenza che ho in realtà una limitata conoscenza della lingua italiana. Perdonatemi se vi chiedo di consentirmi di proseguire nella lingua franca della creazione l'inglese.
Thank you.
That's very kind of you, and let's agree, I will now stop to torture your wonderful language. And let's continue in English if I... It's important that I apologize for not speaking Italian, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is a historic meeting. This is the first time, as a lawyer active in aviation, I find a room with a preponderance of lawyers, prosecutors, judges. Wonderful. Because you are so much part of the equation if we want to discuss just culture. And I'm very proud that we now have made, thanks to our hosts, and I'm really extremely honored to be with you, with the highest under the law, from the judiciary, with our military friends, with lawyers, and of course also a few people dedicated to the good course of aviation. My slides are in Italian, but I must warn you, I have the English version with me here, and I hope in the course of wanting to communicate, we can jointly discuss a number of issues before us. Just culture is about the protection of safety data. It is to create a balance between two goals: balancing safety and the administration of justice. No priority. Two equally important goals. I think that is very important. But we have to understand, we also have to stay away from extremes in defending, in insisting of one of the two activities. There cannot be any immunity from prosecution. Nobody, ladies and gentlemen, is above the law. Nobody. It's as simple as that. But misuse of prosecution, of judiciary, of state forces, of course, is also not on. And there are not many, a few cases where the justification, the suspicion may be justified, that sometimes states are a bit quick on throwing a few people, a few pilots in jail to take away the attention of their own failures. Of course, it never happens in Italy, but it is an issue. We also have to address the issue, resolve it at the root. We have to protect, within the limits set by the administration of justice, reporting and investigation processes. And Masuti, who is, I'm sure also for you, my guiding star, if I want to hear from the academics, where are we going, what am I doing, it's Anna who tells me. I'm a guy with a mixed background. I teach a little bit at Leiden University, but I'm also a practical lawyer in a technical and engineering aviation environment. And there the Legal Service of Eurocontrol always did two things. When they came to us, we either were what the French call so beautifully the juristes bricoleurs, the do-it-yourself lawyers, do a little bit like this, do a little bit like that. And sometimes we are the ayatollahs. We say, no, the law is the law. And I greatly enjoyed it, I must tell you. So therefore, we have to protect processes, we have to establish, and I'm going to try to indoctrinate you on that one, so I warn you in advance, to establish what we would call a prosecution policy, and very important, to support and educate the judiciary. That is more difficult than it sounds, because any good judge uses the law, his law, national law, and for that reason I apologize because I should be talking Italian because I'm talking to judges, and their lingua franca is the law of the land. It is an Italian law, not a Dutch one, not a Chinese one, it's an Italian one. And I apologize again, but I'm very motivated to try to improve my Italian. But it's very important to support and educate the judiciary, but on the other hand, a judge can say, Van Dam, what are you telling me? Today it's aviation, tomorrow it's the medical world, next time I have notaries. Come on, I'm doing my job, and of course I handle everything. So Van Dam has to convince the judiciary, the prosecutors, that there are a number of reasons why aviation still may be an element, an issue, where a judge, a prosecutor may wish to be educated at his or her request on a number of issues. We're talking about a very international activity, which is already, and Anna alluded to it already, of course, limited by the fact that administration of justice is still very much a sovereign function. It's Italian justice, not community, European Union justice, or Dutch justice. And aviation is very much an international activity. I'll come back to it later. Safety data. Data relevant for safety are generated, of course, and I also already referred to it, in accident and incident investigations, interviews, reading the cockpit, voice recorder, other instruments, interviews of technicians, you name it. And accidents, let's not forget, are almost always a terrible, chaotic event. People are getting killed, emotions run high, and often the processes associated with that investigation are not perfect, to put it mildly. There's also the notion of mandatory and voluntary reporting, and that is, I would suggest, one of the key issues for just culture, because it is the non-sexy process of collecting hundreds of thousands of reports each year, globally, where pilots, where controllers said, oops, I made a mistake. I was led by my instrument to believe something wrong, there was an ergonomic issue, or it was not my day. I made a mistake. And as a professional, I'd like to report my mistake, to make sure that people read it, find a pattern perhaps, and find solutions to stop me making that mistake. As a lawyer, I don't like the term, but we and the pilots and controllers like to call it an honest mistake. All those reports, the mandatory ones, because the law requires them to do so, if as a pilot you lose an engine, you're supposed to report it, and if you don't report it, it's still very clear that something happened. But little things, I fell asleep, only for 5 minutes. These days pilots have a tendency to sleep much longer and much deeper, but that's another thing. Again, the very question, why do those people fall asleep? Is it so boring to be a pilot? Is it so taxing? Will your boss ask you to fly day and night instead of within limited hours? Again, there is often more behind such an action than we all think. So reporting is the lifeline of safety, the lifeline of improving safety. even now, as we are in dire economic days, in the next 20 years, I think the number of movements in Europe are going to double. Don't ask me why, but that means that the risk will quadruple, 4 times as high. So there is really work to be done here. And it's work which has to be done, and it is my red line in our discussions together with the judiciary. And there are data provided by other regulatory or service profession functions through certification process, safety management, a very new, important notion. The new Annex 19 in Chicago is about safety management. And therefore, Justicia basically focuses in particular on the notion of that innocent, ongoing incident reporting. If you have an incident, nobody is killed. No damages. If you have a serious incident, you were simply lucky and you could or should have been killed. If it's a minor incident, it simply happens. So the next one is, who wants access to those data? And here, of course, we get close to the fire. Clearly, aviation safety authorities, incident investigators, regulators. You, the judicial authorities, administration of justice, retribution. That is still a relevant, an honorable criminal motivation. Your boss, if you are a pilot or a controller. Your corporate entity. Your boss wants to know what's happening. It's part of the corporate safety management system. But sometimes, not in Italy of course, your boss thinks Van Dam is an older pilot. His salary is a little bit high. If Van Dam makes a mistake, that's a wonderful moment to let him go and replace him by a younger pilot. Ethically, not the right thing, but well, in difficult times, let's be honest, and as a lawyer I have a bad character, it helps me greatly. It could be happening. And the public and the media, I'm not going to discuss that too much, but I bring some of you in memory the Linate accident, which was blessed with a lot of media attention, a lot of newspaper, and perhaps even pressure on the judiciary. Understandable, but difficult. So we are basically trying in this culture to balance 2 columns. And I realize now I gave justice the red color and safety the green one. It could have been the other way around, or next time I'll try to find better colors. But it's important to see those 2 columns. Aviation safety, justice and public information. Incident reporting, accident and incident investigation with the goal of safety and protection, and the other one, justice, public information, prosecution of criminal offenses, freedom of information and press, with the final goal of adjudication and sometimes punishment or disclosure. Both, I think, are public interests. Annex 13, and Anna has already referred to it, in the safety column you have, and I'll come back to it, but one of the key things in Annex 13 you find is the purpose of the investigation is not to apportion blame or liability, but to find a cause, to make sure that safety is served by an unhindered investigation. So here we are really talking about 2 domains, and that's why I'm so excited I'm here. One is safety, the other is the judiciary. Safety is international. Safety only works if you exchange views, if you set your rules increasingly at the international level, ICAO, EU, because only then you're going to harmonize more than only local traffic. And there is hardly any local traffic, certainly in Europe anymore. Don't forget, Europe is an interesting field of new developments because we are a blanket, a colorful picture of more than 40 sovereign states who interact in my sovereign state, the Netherlands. If you fly in a 777, you cross the Netherlands in 8 minutes. And if you're in a hurry, in 5 or 6. So it doesn't work anymore to be only an isolated safety regulator, safety controller, or an air traffic controller. You have to interact. Judiciary, that is by definition, and I must confess, it should be, and I hope it will remain, at least for the next 10 or 15 years, a sovereign function. Justice, be careful now with so many esteemed judges and prosecutors in the room, justice is not a science. Justice is an art. It's a picture of a society. And justice in China is a different picture than justice in Italy, whether we like it or not. But the Italians are happy with it, and the Chinese perhaps also. So it's very important to take that into account and to find, for the moment, a very good justification for the sovereign function of the judiciary. Safety is very much, I already alluded to it, supranational rules. Justice is national law, national criminal law, national criminal procedural law, because it reflects, again, that system. Safety is dynamic. If you find a scary thing in the tail of a Boeing 747, you publish something, you quickly make a rule, and you hope that everybody understands what the rule means and starts applying it. It will be the end of justice if you do the same in criminal law. Because the law is a static, and that's not a negative illusion. It's a static process where citizens have to be able, where judges have to be able to interpret, understand the law, and a criminal law which changes every month, I would humbly suggest that's not a good sign. So therefore, again, in the safety people, not surprisingly, their domain is safety first, and the judiciary, and I salute them, the rule of law. Almost philosophical notion, but it is the basis of any civil society, with all its complications and all the issues associated with it. So here are two domains who seldom meet. Or what you often, I have so many safety meetings where we are sitting there in ICAO, in the EU, and yelling about safety and yelling about the judiciary who were never in the room. We all agreed, we left very happy, and nothing happened. Those were incestuous meetings. So therefore, let's meet, let's discuss. Just culture addresses safety, addresses accountability. It is triggered by the perceived criminalization of aviation accidents and incidents. You've seen the books, mostly written by pilots, controllers, where you see a pilot handcuffed, looking a bit dejected, a lot of stripes, very important, led to jail. The poor guy, he's doing his job and he is thrown into jail. What a terrible fate. That, I think, is a gross overstatement of reality. As a matter of fact, the pilots and controllers I meet, and it goes for the judiciary too, are almost invariably hard-working, proud professionals who accept the risks of their trade and trying to make the best of it. So let's be careful there. It's evolved from confrontational notions like punitive-free reporting, blame-free reporting, and again that still has the taste of, I'm above the law. The things I'm doing are so important, I shouldn't be bothered by any prosecutor. Come on, this is about safety. My foot, ladies and gentlemen, it's not true. And nobody is and should be above the law. Within reasons, any professional should have the reasonable expectation that the chances that he's ever invited, let alone indicted by a prosecutor, are extremely small, but are there. If he's drunk, if he's drugged, bingo, he goes. And the main objective, not surprisingly, is to safeguard and increase incident reporting levels, not to justify absence of reporting. And there have been a few cases, one in Holland already quite some time ago, and it led to dramatic changes in the work of the prosecutor. Fred will talk about it. There was a case where an incident was reported to a prosecutor who started to prosecute, And in the end, after appeals, and that's the thing which is possible in the Netherlands, and I'm not sure about Italy, a few people were condemned but without punishment, but they did have, at that moment, a criminal record, of course. And there were controllers who said, okay, that's clear. If that's happening to me, I will not report anything anymore. And then, for a little while, the number of incidents reporting went down. It went up again. The controllers are still professional people with professional consciences. But of course, it is an issue. And you have to provide some reasonable certainty, expectation to controllers and pilots, and increasing managers, by the way, that if they report issues, they will not automatically go to jail. And the main task is, as a teacher, I like to repeat things, to balance responsibilities of aviation safety with those of the national criminal judiciary. So here we have the two elements of just culture. Actions, actions, omissions, and decisions expected from someone with your level of training and experience should not be prosecuted. I think not too many of us would basically disagree with that. The second one is, but I'm using the words here in a generic term, gross negligence, perhaps you call it culpa grave, folklore with the French, or willful misconduct should not be tolerated. And if I would ask for a raise of arms here, I think most of us would agree with that separation, with those two key issues. The interesting and most difficult question is, of course, who draws the line? Who makes that call? That, ladies and gentlemen, can only be a prosecutor and ultimately a judge. Nobody else. It's good, after saying that, to do a reality check and to look around us and to say, okay, investigations, safety people, important, let's keep everything together, reports should not be readily available. If we look globally, you'll find that most states have established in their applicable legislation a priority for the judiciary, police, prosecutorial officials, in the investigation of accidents and incidents. There are exceptions, the Netherlands before, but only after 4 or 5 years ago, the Turkish Airlines crash at Schiphol, and there we had situations where almost literally fist fights started between, on the one hand, the safety investigator, and the other hand, the police. The smoking remnants of the plane in the background, with 5 or 6 people killed in there, and the two started fighting. This is my plane, go away, it's my plane, phoning the other, chasing each other. Disgusting, outrageous. That's why you'll find, both in the EU regulations, so aptly discussed by Anna, 996, a number of provisions, an invitation for the safety people to contact, to interact with the judiciary, and it sounds so simple, but it's so effective. Know each other's telephone numbers, it's that simple, and make a quick call to say, okay, we have an issue here, do we think this is terrorism, do we think this is really an issue, or can we get the lead, but I keep you posted. And the British do it, the Dutch do it, and it works very well. Most states have legislation that prevents use by the judiciary of the evidence of the investigator has collected or collated. Mind the words, don't use it. In the end, the report is public, of course, but nothing stops, although it's costly, a prosecutor to do his or her own investigation. To really ask everybody, put them under oath, and go painstakingly to the process of trying to find causes. That's costly, it may not yield to many issues, but sometimes it's necessary, and there are cases where you find, Turkish Airlines was an example, I think, the prosecuting basically redoing part of the investigation to make sure that their call, whether this will be an issue for prosecution, should be followed or not. And finally, I know one little exception in Denmark. Almost all national or international legislation makes an exception for the national judiciary in the exercise of their functions. And rightly so. Because a rule which would set, that goes for occurrence reporting regulation, which is now being discussed in the EU, you cannot simply say, we now make a rule where we kind of interfere with a function which is not even the competence of the EU. And if we have a national judiciary which wishes to do its function, you have to respect the role. Just culture task force, my club. Basically, and we have discussed with many, it's a Eurocontrol body, but we had Americans around, we had member states, CEAs, it was almost a global body with a lot of discussion where we, for 2 or 3 years, were really in a rather informal setting that is, I can assure you, very effective. We're discussing how to make this work, how do we do this, and we at that moment in time, about a year and a half ago, came up with 2 deliverables. One is to suggest, to create a model for a national policy, basically a prosecutorial or justice policy on the prosecution of aviation cases. The other one was support to the judiciary to find ways and means to at least create a group of dedicated people who would be, on request, available to a prosecutor or a judge. And we are now in the middle of this making our rounds at regional meetings, and we will be coming to Italy, I can assure you, also in that context, to discuss with regional prosecutors. And the approach is to take a big state and to ask that state and the surrounding states, invitation only, to come with their prosecutorial, with the judiciary, as well as the CEA people, to discuss this model. It is what it is, just a model. I'll come back to that later. The good news is that both initiatives were unanimously endorsed by the Eurocontrol member states, all 40, together with the European Union. Endorsed because it's not a mandatory thing. This is an Einforderung zum Tanz, an invitation to consider whether this would fit the Italian goals in addressing gross negligence issues, safety issues, in the way the judiciary works. In the Netherlands, it has been implemented through an instruction, I think, by the Prosecutor General to the Netherlands prosecutors, and in particular to my good friend Fred, to only prosecute in cases of gross negligence, but we'll come back to that. So just here some tangible stuff to deliver. And the model for a national aviation prosecution policy, again, is to provide directions, normally emanating from the Prosecutor General, but sometimes perhaps from a Ministry of Justice in more federative states, to provide directions regarding the criminal investigation and prosecution of potential criminal offenses resulting from aviation accidents or incidents that come to the attention of the prosecutors through the reporting of civil aviation incidents. In Europe, you have an institutionalized process of collecting those reports, incident reports. Sometimes they are anonymized, which is always difficult because it's such a small world, and if a Dutch pilot makes a mistake, within a few hours all his colleagues, well, what am I saying? With Twitter, 15 minutes. All his colleagues know what's happening and what's going on. So, anonymizing those reports is often not very effective unless the report reads, a plane took off, something happened, the plane landed. That's useless for everybody, for anybody. So it is always an issue, and therefore the model policy is perhaps important. It's a model that can be implemented, adapted, refused, at least to reflect national specific elements or requirements. and its national implementation, I'll keep hammering on that anvil, is based on a unilateral decision. It is basically a policy. Very excited Italian professors who were, like me, a little bit worried what's happening, because here you find the Commission through the back door entering the realm of sovereignty of the administration of justice at sovereign level by introducing a criminal law definition, gross negligence, as a norm for a CEO of a corporation, an airline, a service provider, to fire or not fire somebody. Personally, I can only speak personally here, I find that scary. It creates a situation where in the regulation not the judiciary but the state is held responsible for implementing that rule, and the Commission is always ready to start an infringement procedure against the state to discuss whether or not they have followed the definition of the skills of gross negligence. And apart from that, you have a situation where you'll find somebody saying, I was fired on the definition of gross negligence. I'm now going to my local prosecutor and said, sir, would you prosecute me? And the prosecutor may say, no, for me that's not gross negligence. Then the chaos is complete. I salute and love my learned friends in the European Commission, but sometimes, with great friendship, I compare them with children who find a new toy, have a lot of power and want it. So they make a rule. The Italians, the member states, say, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. You go ahead, and all of a sudden it becomes a competency which threatens competencies which don't even exist in the EU, administration of justice. So I would humbly suggest you have a good look at that discussion, at that rule, which is, by the way, still in an interesting confrontation in the European Parliament, who are yelling just culture every other line, and the states who are worried about the protection of their sovereign function, the administration of justice. I'm almost there, but I cannot resist to address a little bit the colloquial, because it's one of the key elements of this policy, which says, prosecutor, judge, could you consider to publish a instruction to your prosecutors, or perhaps for courts, to do what you basically already do? Because that is one of the findings we found in our discussions with prosecutors and states. By whatever name, very often prosecutors, judges already in the different member states draw the line at what is colloquially called gross negligence. It is heartwarming. We talk to Polish prosecutors, wonderful people, but not the most progressive, coming back from the system which was rather state-minded, and where you always look over your shoulder whether the state is happy with what you're doing, who were saying, oh, Mr. Van Dam, no. And if you discuss them, and Fred gave them a few cases, then all of a sudden they say, yeah, well, yeah, sure. We call it different, but yes, it's gross negligence. And therefore, I'm rather optimistic, if I may, that in the end, it may be acceptable in the context of that balance where a prosecutor says, well, basically we are truly only interested in gross negligence, both in the context of incidents and perhaps also in the context of an accident. Render unto Caesar the things are Caesar's. This is the best place to, of course, to use that phrase. Leave to the prosecutor, leave to the judges what is theirs. And I already talked about my last slide. Issues. We discussed them. The notion of criminalization as depicting the bare devil, depicting the monster of justice, which is outrageous. There are misuses. They should be vehemently fought and brought to light, but there are still scars, and it's still a good thing to have administration of justice. For God's sake, dear friends, it is the foundation of any civil state. Let's therefore address in your language, on your control, the notion of willful misconduct and gross negligence. Let's hope there are possibilities, because it makes life a bit easier, but with full respect for your procedural criminal law, to see whether prosecutorial discretion through the intervention of a juge d'instruction or a preliminary judge may work. Let's have a hard look at the EU competencies, and may I say ambitions. Let's step away from the safety czars, the guys who say, Minister, I'm about safety. If you don't give me my money, there will be accidents and you will be responsible, not me. And the minister says, yeah, sure, go ahead. And of course the guys in the ivory towers who say, we are the judiciary, go away. Of course, we do our thing. Van Dam, move on. That is not necessarily the best approach either. And finally, 3 times, this is the end of my presentation to you, communication, communication, communication. Thank you very much.